In their seats, the clerk will open the roll and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our guest chaplain, Reverend Dr. Annie Ricker, Shawnee Heights United Methodist Church, Topeka, Kansas. Guest of Representative Vic Miller, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Haskins.
Would you join me in an attitude of prayer? God of abundance, we gladly remember that the eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due season. You opened your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. Help us also this day to remember our neighbors, especially those who are not well-fed, with countless needs that are still unmet. And remind us, God, that often the way you open your hand is when we open ours. Help us to live and govern in such a way that your open hands can truly bless our neighbors in Kansas. It is in your name we pray. Amen.
Has every member had an opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Speaker recognizes Representative Johnson on a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we welcome and honor Tammy Potts of Basehor, Kansas for her community leadership and national acclaim as a mentoring leader in the Kansas Mentoring Care Cap programs. Because of her many years of dedication and care for improving the education of children from preschool to 12th grade in her own Basehor-Linwood district, and modeling the program for other districts statewide, thousands of youth have benefited. Tammy's career began not in education, but in the news business, where she became an award-winning television journalist in the Kansas City area and for national news services. People who will remember her news days remember a hard-nosed journalist who reported on some of the city's biggest stories. Her diligence sometimes placed her in dangerous situations, but she never backed down.
In 1999, Tammy Potts began her new role in education under the mentorship of Kansas State University's Coach Bill Snyder, with Coach Snyder spearheading the statewide movement to implement the volunteer help of adults in schools as mentors in teaching and behavior modeling. The Kansas Mentorship Program was created. Coach Snyder brought his success as a coach to education, and the mentor program has flourished. In December, Coach Snyder attended Tammy's retirement ceremonies to serve as the guest speaker. Today, Representative Johnson is presenting his longtime education friend a certificate from the Kansas House of Representatives, which states, for her historic community leadership as a statewide and nationally acclaimed mentoring leader, beginning in 1999 under Coach Snyder and continuing until her retirement in December of 2023, she helped her school district in the state of Kansas become the gold standard in mentoring initiatives. Okay. Mr. Speaker, we'd ask that everybody stand and celebrate Tammy Potts on her success, and we'd ask that our remarks be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. so much for everything. Speaker recognizes Representative Mosier on a point of personal privilege.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jewell County, Kansas, 1,500 miles of road, more than any other county in Kansas. The most county bridges of any county in Kansas. Home of more mammoth remains than anywhere else on the Great Plains. Also home to the highest older population dependency ratio in Kansas. As the roads and bridges connect Jewell County citizens, the old and the young, wisdom has been passed down to the youth of Jewell County. These fine young people with me today bring life and energy to Jewell County, and their future is bright. The average GPA of these 6 students is 3.85. 4 of them have 4.0s, and many are taking advanced courses and dual credit courses, including trigonometry, calculus, college algebra, and English composition. I'd like you to meet these fine students from Rock Hill High School, Mankato, Kansas, your 1A State Champion Scholars Bowl team. Callan Beck. Callan is a junior and plans to attend NCK Technical College to complete the welding program, and he aspires to become a leader in a successful business. Ariel Jacobs. Raise your hand when I say your name. Ariel is a senior, and after high school, she plans to be an independent business owner and stay in the Mankato area. Cooper Ray. Cooper is a senior and plans to attend K-State and major in writing. Cooper aspires to become a script writer, a technical writer, or work for a publisher. Hannah Simmelink. Hannah is a senior and plans to attend the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs to become a space operations officer. Isabella Volker. Isabella is a senior and she plans to attend McPherson College to cheer and pursue a career as an elementary or middle school science teacher. Ethan Worth. Ethan is a sophomore and plans to attend K-State and major in electrical engineering following high school. Coach Chris Ray. Coach Ray has been with Rock Hills for the past 4 years and has coached Scholars Bowl for 2 years. I would also like to recognize in the gallery that today the entire junior and senior classes from Rock Hills High are here. So please join Senator Bowers, Representative Troy Waymaster, who used to represent part of Jewell, and me in congratulating the 1A State Champion Scholars Bowl team from Rock Hills High, USD 107, Mankato, Kansas, home of the Grizzlies. Mr. Speaker, I ask that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Speaker recognizes Representative Sutton on a point of personal privilege.
All right, we get everybody up here? Come on and file around, file around. All right, body. I want to welcome you to USD 231 Day here at the Capitol. For the first time in 20 years, The Gardner-Edgerton High School boys cross-country team brought home a state championship this year. They started the season with a bang, winning the JK Gold Classic, and went on to win the coveted Kansas City Metro Cross Country Championship. The team finished off the season hitting the trifecta with the Sunflower League Championship, Regional Championship, and State Championship. The team was led by Parker William, who went on to be named the first team All-Sunflower League. He's not here, or else I'd have him raise his hand. Oh, is he here? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, very good. That's him. Who went on to win the first team All-Sunflower League. He was also named All-Regional and All-State. Nick Colonzo and Cade Halton. There you go, excellent. Were also recognized as All-League and All-State selections, as well as academic All-State. Now, the team was named the Greater Kansas City Cross Country Coaches Association Team of the Year. They're led by the Greater Kansas City Cross Country Coaches Association of the Year coach, Walt Cochran, who I think several of you seem to know already. The Trailblazer football program also had a historical season. They finished the season with a 12-1 record and a share of the Sunflower League on the way to a victory over, what city was that? Derby, for the first state championship in school history. This was a complete team effort throughout the summer and fall, and all league honors went to Thomas Saveston, right behind me, and Max Nichols. Very good. And I've lost my place. Thomas was also named Sports in Kansas All-State and is #1 in his class academically. I think that's kind of cool. That's not a comprehensive list. This is just the student athletes who are here today. There's a much longer list that will be showing up in the journal for all the All-State and All-Conference folks that we had listed. Brian McCall is the Sports in Kansas Assistant Coach of the Year. He wasn't able to make it. They're led by Coach Jesse Owen. There we go, Jesse Owen, who was named the Sunflower League Coach of the Year, Sports in Kansas Head Coach of the Year, and the Kansas City Chiefs Eric Driscoll Coach of the Year. Athletic Director Jason Radel was certainly involved both in the cross country and football. But if you thought that was great, there's more. Although Manhattan did win the 6A wrestling tournament, GEHS had success there as well, with state champions Madeline, is it Riedinger? Sorry? Riedinger, Madeline Riedinger, and Kason Smith. There you are, all right. With them is Coach Quartz, who also made it possible. So Bobby, help me congratulate these amazing student athletes and the coaches who made their success possible. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Speaker recognizes Representative Sutton for another point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, lest you think that Gardner-Edgerton School District is just about excellent athletics, I want you to understand that we're about excellence in general. That's how we roll. The first Milken Educator Awards were presented by the Milken family in 1987. This was created by Lowell Milken, And the awards provide public recognition and individual financial rewards to elementary and secondary school teachers, principals, and specialists from around the country who are furthering excellence in education. The recipients are heralded in early to mid-career for their achievements and the promise of what they will accomplish. This award is hailed as the Oscars of teaching. The award only honors 75 recipients in the 2023-2024 year. And I present to you one of these very few recipients, Matthew Maskey. Where'd he go? There he is. Matthew Maskey breathes life into world history and geography for his 9th and 10th grade students at GEHS, where, by the way, he was also a student at the same school. I think that's neat. His methods include integrating real-world scenarios and collaborative inquiry-based instructional practices, transforming study into a vibrant learning experience. Mr. Maskey with Mr. Maskey, that makes more sense, are two other people who certainly contributed to the success of our teachers and our district. Gardner-Edgerton High School Principal, Frank Bell, and USD 231 Superintendent, Dr. Brian Huff. So, body, please once again join me in congratulating the 2023-2024 Milken Educator Award winner, Matt Maskey. Standing ovation. Yeah, see? And Mr. Speaker, I ask that those words be spread across the journal as well.
Without objection, so ordered. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill 2648 by the Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, an act concerning administrative rules and regulations, requirements for adoption of rules and regulations, providing that agency adjudications shall not be used to establish policies that are rules governing future private conduct that have the force of law, relating to economic impact statements, requiring legislative ratification for certain rules and regulations, requiring the director of the budget to review an agency's determination of implementation and compliance costs, and disapproves proposed rules and regulations with incomplete or inaccurate economic impact statements, removing a requirement that legislative post-audit conduct an audit in 2026 pertaining to economic impact statements.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2648. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had an opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Tarwater votes aye. Representative Clifford votes aye. Representative Carr votes no. Representative D. Miller votes no. Dennis Miller. Representative Haskins votes no. Representative Schlingenstiepen votes no. Representative Stogsdale votes no. Any other changes of vote? Representative Ballard votes no. Any further changes of vote? Seeing none? 86. Carr votes no. Look at the board. Representative Carlin votes no. Representative Helgerson votes. You vote no? No. Representative Helgerson votes no. Representative Vic Miller votes no. Representative Alcala votes no. Representative Waggle votes no. Any further changes of vote? Seeing none, 82 having voted in favor, 36 against the passage of House Bill 2648, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 195 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning the Children's Cabinet authorizing the Cabinet to establish a nonprofit corporation to raise funds to benefit the Dolly Parton's Imagination Library Book Gifting Program.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 195. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had an opportunity to record their vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Williams? Votes aye. Any further changes of vote? Seeing none, 118 having voted in favor, 0 against the passage of Senate Bill 195. The same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 307 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning the Kansas Fights Addiction Act, adding for-profit private entities to the definition of qualified applicant, authorizing members of the Kansas Fights Addiction Grant Review Board to be paid subsistence allowances, mileage, and other expenses when attending meetings of the board after January 8, 2024.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 307. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had an opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Will Carpenter votes aye. Any other changes of vote? Representative O'Hobson votes no. Further changes of vote? Seeing none, 91 voting in favor and 27 against the passage of Senate Bill 307, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Speaker recognizes the majority leader for a motion to resolve into the committee of the whole.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into the committee of the whole for purposes of considering those items under the heading of general orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The Speaker appoints Representative Blue to chair the committee of the whole.
Good morning, body. I love a standing ovation. First item of business is House Bill 2676. And purposes of carrying House Bill 2676, the chair recognizes Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill came to me from a family that lost their son to suicide. He was interacting with an online website that encouraged, promoted, individuals to commit suicide. They would tell you how to do it, why you should do it. Don't listen to your parents. Your parents will lie to you. They'll tell you things like, we can help you. Ignore them. Not only did they encourage suicide, they also supplied the substance to fulfill the suicide. Unfortunately, the mom received the package and delivered it to her son. For me, that's pretty hard. The committee spent a great deal of time working with different attorneys, different DAs, judges, criminal prosecutors, et cetera, to work on the language. It has been rather difficult to find case law for the internet work where people have been convicted, but we do have case law for those that ex-girlfriend convinces ex-boyfriend to commit suicide. And that was actually an incident that did occur in a representative from South Wichita. And he also brought a bill, so we combined the two bills into one. I know that people have, some concerns about the constitutional idea of this. There are other states that have it on the books. It just has not gone through a prosecution yet. I think the work by the committee has addressed many of those concerns. We look forward to seeing what the Senate brings back to us. So at this time, I'll stand for questions.
Purposes of speaking to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The carrier of the bill did a good job at explaining the bill, but I would say, just to explain a little bit more, there were two different bills that we worked on and two different hearings that we did in terms of what encouraging suicide was about, and whether it's texting, whether it's websites. We heard a lot of testimony, and we heard opponent testimony as well. And we ended up working through the two bills, combining the bills, basically gutting one bill and reformulating it from scratch. And I think that we did a good job. I'm not going to stand up here and say that there may not be holes to the bill. I'm not going to stand up here and say that this is going to clarify everything, or that there may not be constitutional challenges. There might. But I do think that this is a good bill. I think that this is a step in the right direction, and I think that it will get us to where we need to go. So with that, I am in favor of the bill, and I would encourage support.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Body, I just wanted to talk about, you guys all probably got a piece of paper. I'd hold it up. It'd be considered a prop on your desk about an individual named Max. Max was a constituent of mine who last spring, unfortunately, took his own life. And the story is absolutely tragic. Max was in a relationship with a young lady where it went south. They broke up. One night, Max underwent a mental health episode. And during this mental health episode, he reached out to the young lady and said he was having thoughts of self-harm. And the lady had a friend that she was with reply to Max from a different number, basically throughout the night, encouraging him to take his own life, harassingly. They were made aware that Max was likely to take his own life, and that's one of the parameters in this bill, is the individual has to know that the individual that they are encouraging is likely to take their own life. And throughout the night, Max received several harassing text messages, such as, "Go ahead and do it. Why are you still here?" Until ultimately, Max's last text message he sent was, "Okay, I'm going to do it." And the last reply was, "Good, nobody will miss you." And that was the last thing that Max ever heard before he took his own life. So these individuals knew that Max was undergoing a mental health episode. These individuals knew Max was likely to take this action of self-harm, and they continued to harass and encourage Max to end his own life to the point to where he did that night. And surprisingly, to me at least, we do not have any laws on the books right now to address this issue. So that's where the nucleus of the idea came from. I want to thank the carrier of the bill for all her hard work on this, as well as our Judiciary Committee. As the Vice Chair said, they kind of took the idea of these two bills, and with the help from the representative from Garden City, who also did a great job, formulated the bill that's before us today. As the ranking member said, there may be constitutional challenges, but there may be constitutional challenges to everything we do in this body. There are other states that have encouraging suicide laws on the books that have withstood or have not been challenged in court. So we won't be unique in this. There's different ways they word it, but there are other states that have addressed this issue. So I just want you guys to be mindful of that, be mindful of the story. I fear with the prevalence of social media we have nowadays, sending these messages to others, it's a lot easier when you don't have to look at the individual who's struggling in the eye. You can just send it through a text message or a Facebook message. So with social media, I'm concerned that this situation is just going to get worse and worse and worse with our youth. So I strongly encourage you guys to support it today. As the chairwoman said, if there are concerns about some of the language, it's too broad. We still have conference committee. We can still tighten it up even on the Senate side, but I would encourage you to move the ball forward with this today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
For further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this bill, and I know that discussing the topic of suicide in our state can be very heavy, and so I would remind everyone in this room and Kansans listening in that help is always available. You can call 988, and Madam Chair, I would encourage any members of the press reporting on this issue today to also include where people can reach out to help, reach out for help if they need it. That being said, I know we're all, every single one of us wants to do more to prevent suicide in our state. It is a crisis, but I would like to offer a clarifying amendment on the definition of the crime of encouraging suicide.
The amendment is short. The clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 23, after means by inserting cap A, also on page 1 in line 25, after the second suicide by inserting semicolon, or cap B, storing a firearm that is not secured in a locked container or equipped with a tamper-resistant mechanical lock or other safety device properly engaged so as to render the weapon inoperable by any person other than the owner or other lawfully authorized user in a place where a person younger than 18 years of age has access to such place.
Representative Hoy, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The way that this amendment would function, if an individual knowingly leaves a gun unsecured in the presence of a child under the age of 18, who they know has communicated that they are having thoughts of attempting suicide, then they would be convicted of the crime of encouraging suicide if they leave that gun unsecured and someone under the age of 18 accesses that firearm and attempts suicide or tragically dies by suicide. And I would say the reason that I'm bringing this forward is the bill does address in line 12 other person's decision or methods of suicide. And for children in Kansas, the most common method of suicide is the use of a firearm. And that is more than all other methods combined for the previous 5 years. And I'd be happy to stand for questions.
For discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this amendment today. However, I do believe this amendment broadens the bill out, and I challenge germaneness.
Germaneness has been challenged. Will the Rule Committee please meet and come up with a ruling? Would the Rules Chair, Representative Humphries, please make a ruling?
Thank you, Body. Thank you for your patience. We had very robust discussion, and we looked at it from many different angles to determine if this amendment is germane to the bill. There are several things that I want to mention. One of the ways we determine if something is germane is about the subject matter. The subject, that's the main thing. The subject matter of this bill is encouraging suicide. And as we look at the amendment, it's a passive action that you maybe even negligently leave something out versus the intentional action of encouraging suicide. And so in that regard, the subject matter really is different. And then the other way to determine, one other way, there's a whole list of things, and we've done it differently through the years, but another way is, does this amendment expand the scope of the bill, or does it, is it a small portion? And the Rules Committee, not unanimously, but generally felt like this amendment expanded the scope of the bill by beginning to list what different methods are. I mean, we could also have listed many other methods. It opens up a whole new section of what this bill could be. And so in that regard, it expanded the bill instead of limiting the bill. And so because of that, it's determined that the amendment is not germane.
You want to? Representative Hoy, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I challenge the ruling of the chair.
The ruling of the Rules Chair has been challenged. I will remind the body that this is a debatable motion, and it is debatable by the following people: the member making the motion to amend, which is Representative Hoy; the member carrying the measure to be amended, which is Representative Landwehr; the majority leader or his designee, which would be Representative Hoheisel; and the minority leader or his designee, which would be Representative Clayton. Sawyer Clayton. Representative Hoy, you may go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Rules Committee did determine the non-germaneness not using 2 points of contact, so I would like to explain the purpose of why I asked for this amendment. If you look in line 12, substantially influences the other person's decision or methods, I asked her if this bill would make it so if somebody says to go shoot yourself, if a child does in fact complete a suicide by firearm, would the person who provided access to that firearm to a child who cannot go buy a firearm at a FFL, would that person be charged under this new crime? And the answer to that is no. This still has the knowingly, you have to know that a child is in crisis and leave it irresponsibly unsecured. It doesn't apply if you leave a gun in a duffel bag in a car. It applies if you knowingly leave an unsecured gun and when a child is in crisis. This does not, in fact, create a new section. This is in the same statute, in the same section, Section C, as used in this section. It does clarify the definition of encouraging suicide. So I think that this is germane, and the bill does mention methods, and this clarifies a method that would be a part of this new crime. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Body, I'd like to remind, I forgot to mention earlier, that each member is limited to 2 minutes. Next would be Representative Landwehr.
Thank you. I would ask that you hold strong with the ruling of our chair on this. One of the pieces in this amendment limits it to minors. This bill addresses all ages of suicide. And as you heard from the chair, you can have a host of methods, and there was a reason we intentionally left it out. We also wanted to keep this bill as distinct as we possibly could to see what happens if it ever gets challenged in court. And the odds are high that it will. But I think by not muddying the waters today, we have a better chance of this standing up. So I would ask that you support the ruling of the chair.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo the sentiment of the previous speaker. I ask the body to vote yes to sustain the rules chair. We have a rules committee for a reason. This is not an indictment on the amendment. This is not a vote on the amendment or a debate on the functioning of the amendment. This debate, this vote right here is just a vote to uphold the ruling of our rules chair. We have a rules chair and we have procedures for a reason. We should support that process. The rules chair heard everybody in the rules committee. She made her ruling and we need to support that ruling. So I urge everybody here to vote yes to sustain the ruling of our rules chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sawyer Clayton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking of rules, I don't know whose phone just rang, but snacks? But in all seriousness, I am, as a member of the Rules Committee, I am not here to discuss what this amendment does or doesn't do, or what the bill does or doesn't do. I am here to discuss the matter at hand, which is, what is germaneness? How does the committee determine germaneness? Although I like to call it germanity. I think it's, more fun that way. But in any case, so if we look at, are we following the rules? Oftentimes the Rules Committee for decades now has followed a tradition of 2 points of contact that was established way back in the early 2000s, prior to even my arrival here in the legislature. And that is a tradition that Rules Committees have been following for quite some time. Now, I felt that we were very able to establish 2 points of contact. If you look at the bill, the word methods is in line 12, and firearms are indeed a method of suicide completion. It also follows under the same statute, KSA 21-5111. So there are your 2 points of contact. During our discussion, the Rules Committee chair mentioned, well, that is not necessarily, that's more of a tradition. So then we go back to referring to Mason's manual. So those of you that have your 2020 copy, or if you can pull it up, let's go ahead and turn to page 284, section 402. And if you look at every single point to determine whether an amendment is germane, the question to be answered is whether the amendment is relevant, appropriate, and in a natural and logical sequence to the subject matter. I believe that it is. To be germane, this is point 3, the amendment is required only to relate to the same subject. It may entirely change the effect or be in conflict with the spirit of the original motion or proposal and still be germane to the subject. This is germane. Please vote no. Follow the rules. Thank you.
As a reminder, a yes vote will sustain the ruling of the chair. A no vote will overturn the ruling. The question arises, shall the chairperson's ruling be sustained? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. Division has been called for. Roll call, seeing 10 hands. This one? Yeah. Okay. A division has been called for. The clerk will need to open the roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, a roll call is in order. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll and take the tally. Is there any member who wishes to change their vote? Seeing none, with yeas being 79, nays being 36, the motion fails. Clerk will record the vote. Representative Hoy, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate having this discussion. At the very least, I hope it does remind adults to properly secure your guns at home, especially if you know if there are kids or your kids, your kids' friends who may be in crisis. This can go a long way to prevent suicide. And if you do look at the Child Death Review Board annual report, from 2017 to 2021, in that period, there were 75 total child deaths by suicide with a firearm. And as I mentioned earlier, that is more than all other methods combined. So it is very important to practice responsible gun ownership and secure those guns to keep our children safe. And all that being said, I still support the underlying bill. I think that we as a legislature need to send a message that that we are going to be there for our fellow Kansans instead of trying to encourage them to take their life. And I thank you, Madam Chair.
For further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to just speak in a little more detail about the work that the committee did to try to protect this bill from a successful constitutional attack on First Amendment grounds. We have not only, the bill not only provides that you have to intentionally encourage somebody to do it, but it also has some other elements that I think will once again protect it from constitutional attack. First, you have to know that the victim is contemplating suicide. Second, it has to be proximate in time from the time you encourage the suicide to the suicide or the suicide attempt. And you have to actually have, the victim actually has to attempt suicide or commit suicide, and your encouragement has to substantially influence the suicide. I think all of those are ways by which we've tightened up the bill. For instance, in Minnesota, there was a statute that encouraged suicide that was declared unconstitutional, but that particular statute did not have any of the elements that I just mentioned. I'd also point out that although this issue hasn't been addressed specifically by our courts, or at least I couldn't find any cases, there was I think a relevant decision from Supreme Court of Kansas in 2017, State versus Johnson, and that case involved murder for hire, and the definition of murder for hire in Kansas includes the word encouraging, and the discussion in that decision involved first a challenge that it was overly vague, and the court deemed it encouraging was something that was not overly vague, and then also there was a First Amendment attack, and it was rejected. I'd also point out that, all speech is not protected under the First Amendment. You have fraud, for instance, incitement to violence, child pornography. There's a case out of the Supreme Court of the United States in '49 where there were picketers who were encouraging or demanding that an agreement be signed by the employer that would violate the Missouri antitrust laws, and the Supreme Court of the United States declared that to be that they enjoined that because they were encouraging unlawful conduct through their speech. So for those reasons, I rise in support of the bill. I'd also just finally say, quite apart from the technicalities that I've been discussing, is I'm encouraged because I believe this is a pro-life bill that both sides of the aisle should support, and it's encouraging to get something we agree on in the body. Thank you.
For further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the bringer of the bill please stand for a question? Can you tell me at this particular moment what I might be thinking?
I think that's an asinine question.
Try again.
Representative, if you could please watch your language.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So my point being, in as much as I believe that there should be some legislation with respect to those individuals that would assist in the suicide or someone's ability to commit suicide, I just think we're far too broad. How am I to know, or how are you to know clearly what someone's thinking? Simply because I might tell someone, well, kill yourself if you feel that way about it. Especially when we're talking about children. If I'm not mistaken, there was, I heard you make the statement earlier that that this was across the board and for everyone. So when, as a teenager, when a young lady would say, "Oh, I'm just gonna die if you don't go out with me," and I say, "Well, die then." Am I then going to fall under the guise of this particular legislation? I think that although something needs to be done, this just leaves it far too broad. Then there's the time factor. What would you consider?
Representative, could you get to your question, please?
Yeah. So my question is, if you would allow me to continue, as I stated, what would you consider an appropriate time to be?
I think that gets determined by a DA, a judge, and a jury.
So in this particular bill, we don't attempt to address what that time frame might be at all. This could be something that took place 2 years ago or 2 days ago.
Again, a DA, a judge, and a jury will make that decision.
And so when we speak to the subject of substantial influence, could you give me a definition of what substantial influence might be?
Well, I think it could be done in several different ways. I believe that the case I talked about in South Wichita was an ex-girlfriend. She knew that her ex-boyfriend was dealing with mental illness in the first place. Then via text, she encouraged him to kill himself.
So thank you for answering the questions. So how would we know? It's clearly been proven that none of us are omniscient or mind readers. So how would we know what someone else is thinking? How do we know that we are in a position of substantial influence in someone else's life? Now that person would know, certainly, but how would you know? And then how would you be able to dictate or formulate those things that you say to that person, especially in the heat of a passionate argument? You know, I'm sure that everyone in here has had something take place in their household that they would rather not share with the rest of the body. You would rather keep that a secret. You've probably said some things, you've probably done some things that you don't want people to know about. Again, I don't want to make light of the attempt at the bill. I just couldn't support it at this time in its current form. You know, I heard someone mention earlier, you know, that at least we've muddied the waters. These are people's lives we're talking about. This is a little more than just muddied water. And with that, I stand in opposition of the bill, or at least until we come up with something that more directly addresses the issue. And I would urge this body to do the same. Thank you.
For further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Buddy, I'm happy we're having this discussion today. This is an issue that I've been working on for quite some time. There's a act that has been passed in 3 other states, Utah, Virginia, and Washington, that would allow an individual to put themselves on a do not sell list. It's completely voluntary. So I appreciate today's conversation addressing suicide methods and the lethality when a firearm is involved. We know that well over 20,000 Americans die by firearm suicide every year. We know many suicide attempts are impulsive. Research shows firearm purchase delays significantly. Give it a cool-off period. We also know that safe storage can do the same thing, whether it's a lock, whether it's 2 locks, whether it's a 72-hour cool-off period, sometimes even 15 minutes can save an individual's life. We also know that a suicide attempt by firearm is, I want to say, 85% higher completion rate. Over the summer, I received at my house the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Kansas Health Statistics Report, Veteran Suicides in Kansas, Mechanisms of Injury, Firearms Outstandingly #1. This is a problem. This is not unique to Kansas. This is not unique to children. This is not unique in any way, shape, or form. Top 10 most pressing mental health issues in Johnson County: suicide. First point made is increased lethal means. We can do more to prevent suicide than pass this bill, and I hope the body will. I will continue to work with the chair of Fed and State to get House Bill number 2339 a hearing. I will not offer my amendment today. I listened in on the rules debate, and I do understand the rules chair has decided that the subject matter of this bill is encouraging suicide. I would argue, I think the subject matter of this bill is preventing suicide, and we can do more. Thank you, body. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Lewis for a second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I wanted to address some of the concerns raised by my good friend and colleague from Sedgwick County. It seems that he's concerned that one of the elements in the crime is what I'd view as a subjective element. It depends on what the victim is, whether the victim has an intention to commit suicide. That's true, but ultimately what this bill says is that that intention or desire has to be communicated to the perpetrator, which is an objective element, not a subjective element. He also asked, what is proximate in time? Proximate is a term that's used, a term of art used all the time in the law. It's well known in the law. It's something that judges are well-versed in dealing with. And Black's Law Dictionary defines it as immediate, nearest in order. So if I were a judge and I was trying this case, I would instruct the jury to that effect, that proximate in times means immediate or nearest in order. I think that's a very clear definition that will pass scrutiny. And so with that, I continue to urge adoption and passage of the bill as we have it. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Landwehr, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've had a healthy debate on this bill. I can guarantee you that the Judiciary Committee did as well, and we took plenty of time for, trying to get advice on how to do this bill. And I think until you've lost a child to suicide, you have no idea. How will you cope? How will you deal with it? How long will the pain last? Will you ever get over it? And it doesn't have to be a child. It can be your neighbor. It could be your grandmother. It could be your aunt, your uncle, your mother, or your father. We don't know how this will stand up in the courts, but I think it's a move that Kansas should make so we can find out what will, and maybe we'll be the state that proves it. I appreciated the bipartisan support in committee, and I appreciated the support from the ranking as he came down here and talked in favor of the bill. So at this time here, I would ask that you, when we rise and report, you support substitute for House Bill 2676 favorable for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Landwehr to report House Bill 2676 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. The last item of business is House Bill 2749. For purposes of carrying House Bill 2749, the chair recognizes Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to adopt the committee report, please.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill deals with the abortion reporting bill that we've had in place through rules and regs for many, many years. And for some reason, in the last few years, instead of this report being available while we're in session to legislators as well as the public, this report now comes in June, July, or whenever the agency decides to produce it. So it will put into statute requirements for the report. It designates that it will be done twice a year instead of annually. We did listen to the discussion when we heard the bill. And at that time, we ran an amendment that would strike out several of the different lines that were concerning to members of the committee. It also changed the word woman to patient because it could be a child in it or it could be an adult. I'll be happy to stand for questions.
For discussion on the bill, Chair recognizes Representative Susan Ruiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And by the way, it's nice to say Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions to ask of the carrier of the bill.
I thought we answered all of our questions. You're like me, you've got more like I do
have more.
sometimes. Let's go.
Okay, so the report will now come in earlier.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So how will the data from the report be used?
Like it's used today.
Which is?
Individuals that want to know, the type of abortions, the number of abortions, in-state, out-of-state, et cetera.
So can anyone access the report?
It's a public document.
Does become a public document. Okay.
Which it is today.
Okay, and so it'll be posted, it's online, I'm assuming?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you to the carrier of the bill for making that clarification. If you read the bill, you will see that there are a number of questions that are asked on the bill. It's kind of a questionnaire. There's at least 11 of them that are questionable. So there's already a report, as the carrier of the bill said, that there's already a report that is given out. And what this does, and it wasn't asked by any state agency at all. This has been brought to the legislature by by a group of people who realistically would like to eliminate abortion totally within the state. So there's ulterior motives to that. HB 2749 would force abortion providers to ask medically unnecessary and intrusive questions to patients about their reasons for seeking an abortion. So the underlying assumption of this bill is that eliminating or restricting access to abortion, quote unquote, helps women. There are already numerous independent studies into the reasons one may ask abortion care, and this data is not needed to inform policy. So when I say about data, for instance, the KBI, you can ask the KBI regarding how many incidents of domestic violence there is, and that's one of the questions that the person would have to answer. And in 2022, there were over 22,000 reported incidents of domestic violence. But somehow that doesn't seem to inform policy in any kind of bills that we have seen either this session or in previous sessions. Intimate partner violence is most prevalent among women of reproductive age. In Kansas, the average victim is female between the ages of 20. So again, we don't need all these extra questions that are going to be asked. We already have the answers to some of those questions. Some of the questions has to do with, the cost of having a child. So the average cost to have a child without insurance is almost $19,000. With insurance, it's almost $3,000. Some of the questions has to do like with childcare. So we already know that 37% of Kansas live in a childcare desert. We already have this information. There is no need to ask a person to answer any more of the questions that they already are asked before and information we already have. This bill seems to be solely motivated by anti-abortion stigma and the desire to harass, intimidate, and shame healthcare providers and patients in Kansas. This bill would create additional administrative barriers on providers and on the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, with a fiscal note starting, because we don't really know, it would cost over $10,000 from the general fund to make changes to the electronic reporting system to collect the data with no tangible benefits to Kansans. The bottom line, this bill is not needed at all. That information that is being asked, we already have that information. And not just for, it's for Kansans, for anyone living in Kansas. We also have data for county, and there's data for outside of the state. So all that information we already have. This questionnaire, this bill is totally unnecessary. I ask you to vote no on HB 2749. Thank you, Madam Chair.
For further discussion, Chair recognizes Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to build on the previous speaker's comments that we don't need any additional data to address the policy issues that are outlined in this bill and to discuss what this bill actually aims to do. So as the carrier mentioned, and as we heard in committee, this bill is purportedly intended to help women. But the real reason is to collect this invasive data with the ultimate purpose of eliminating abortion in Kansas, and in the process, stigmatizing and potentially re-traumatizing, in cases of rape and incest, the women who seek to terminate their pregnancies. A list of reasons in this bill are lists of issues, as was mentioned, that we are already aware that many Kansans, and particularly pregnant Kansans, face. These include lack of access to adequate and affordable health care and childcare, domestic and sexual violence and abuse, and lack of social services and supports in Kansas. We already know that these issues exist, yet this body continually fails to act on them. If we really cared about helping women, why are we still waiting for a hearing on Medicaid expansion? Why does the Welfare Reform Committee continue to attack access to SNAP and TANF benefits? Why are we not increasing access to contraceptives and sex education, or even having a discussion about paid parental leave, for that matter? These policies would help pregnant women and help reduce unintended pregnancies in Kansas. But despite what these proponents purport, this bill doesn't actually provide any tangible benefits to Kansans. From my view, it only has the potential to harm them. In addition to stigmatizing their extremely personal decision, I do wonder, how will this data be used? Will it be shared with anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers that use various tactics to dissuade women from seeking abortions? Will it be otherwise used to target patients to prevent them from accessing abortion care? In truth, this bill is not about innocuous data collection. Patients seeking any other form of necessary health care would never be asked such intrusive and personal questions to justify why they are seeking that care. This bill is about targeting women who make the difficult and extremely personal decision to get an abortion. And we all know that Kansans spoke loud and clear on August 2nd that they don't want this body further restricting or eliminating access to abortion care in Kansas. They don't want this body interfering with their personal health care decisions, which is why I urge this body to listen to them and vote no on House Bill 2749. Thank you, Madam Chair.
For further discussion, Chair recognizes Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I think on this issue, I think about when I was sitting in the balcony my first year and wondering, this is how it all happens here with the topic of abortion. Seeing legislation like this come back and back, little pieces, it's not fooling anybody. These are attempts to build back up and take abortion rights and care away from Kansas. The legislature is equipped to act now on issues for pregnant Kansans may be facing, and any information gathered from the intrusive questioning proposed in HB 2749, it is not necessary for all these questions, additional questions, to be asked. We have legislation in this body that we could take, as a previous speaker said, bills to help prevent domestic violence and abuse, take away financial barriers for low-income Kansans and families to make these decisions a little bit more easier, and increasing access to contraception are just a few policy ideas that we could do. In committee, I offered an amendment thinking, you know, I'm not too young, but as a younger woman, and trying to put myself in someone's shoes who might be in these very vulnerable situations. There's a power dynamic being played here, unfortunately, when you're given this sheet of paper and asked to answer all these questions. There's nowhere in these list of questions, if you were just handed to somebody, that they had the option to opt out. I tried to run that amendment in committee and it failed. But just wanted to let folks know that you don't have to take this survey. The underlying aim of this bill is to harass folks who do seek abortion care. It's invasive, and the reporting of the additional questions are not quite necessary. With that, I have an amendment.
The amendment is short. The clerk will read.
On page 2 in line 4, by striking "of the following reasons" and inserting "reason," by striking all in lines 8 through 34 and inserting "the patient has a constitutional right to an abortion."
Representative Haswood, would you like to explain your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is pretty short, but basically it is striking out all the additional questions that this legislation is proposing and adding in the patient has a constitutional right to an abortion.
Is there discussion on the amendment? For discussion on the amendment, Chair recognizes Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I talked earlier about how we went in and we removed a bunch of different things, and in this section, we actually removed several lines. We know that data is important, and there was an organization and a report that was laid out by the opponents time and time again during their testimony, and that was the Guttmacher report. It's a survey. The Guttmacher Institute says from their website, understanding reasons for having abortions can inform public debate and policy regarding abortion and unwanted pregnancies. Demographic changes over the last 2 decades highlight the need for reassessment of why women decide to have abortions. Today, we have the opportunity to have more services for women when they get in these positions. For many years, women hid when they got pregnant with an unwanted child. They don't hide anymore, and they don't have to hide anymore. But they should have the right to have all the decisions, all the information available to them. It also means as policymakers, we need to understand what is occurring and what else can we do to help these women make a more informed decision. Now, if they decide to do an abortion, that's their decision. I may not agree with it, but that's their decision to make. I don't know that we have anything else in our laws that states something's constitutional or not constitutional. That kind of concerns me a little bit. I'll just make this brief. I'm going to ask that you not support the amendment.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Haswood, you may close.
I close.
Excuse me, sorry. You have heard the motion by Representative Haswood to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Those appear to have it. Those do have it. Motion fails. Representative Haswood, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to be very clear today that on August 2nd, 2022, Kansans told us, do not put your business in my abortion care. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill, Chair recognizes Representative Oropeza.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak on House Bill 2749. I was adamantly opposed to asking questions and getting in between our patients and their care, especially at a most difficult time in their life, and making choices and decisions and having those intrusive questions as well answered. I did appreciate the amendments that were offered in committee where we didn't have to end up ranking those answers and making it 1, 2, and 3. I felt that that was definitely something that was more humane and going forward. In saying that, I still believe this is still inhumane for public consumption to have a reason as to why you are getting health care. We do not go into everybody else's clinic appointments and have those intrusive questions then broadcast for public consumption. I am very, very concerned about this. I made those concerns very clear in the committee that this is almost like a research project that is being levied by a state institution without consent or safety regulations that are normally adhered to when doing a research project. This is very, very important from a patient standpoint. I have stood up here before and talked about the Tuskegee Airmen. We do not need to do that as a state. In saying that, I do have an amendment.
The amendment appears long. Representative, would you care to explain your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with my amendment, I do agree that there are things that we do need to know about reproductive care. And I would like to know, since the downfall of Roe v. Wade, the increase in vasectomies. And I would also like to know, since we are asking questions of other patients, that we ask the same questions of those patients who do receive vasectomies.
Is there objection to waiving the reading of the amendment? There is objection. The clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 9, after terminated by inserting "and vasectomies that have been performed." In line 13, after terminated by inserting "and vasectomies that have been performed." In line 18, after terminated by inserting "and vasectomies that have been performed." In line 26, by striking "or" and inserting a comma. In line 27, after performed, by inserting "or" the names of the persons upon whom a vasectomy was performed. On page 3 in line...
Objection has been waived. For discussion on the amendment, Chair recognizes Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I challenge germaneness.
Germaneness has been challenged. Calling on the Rules Chair to make a ruling.
Can I leave my stuff?
The chair calls on the chair for the Rules Committee, Representative Humphries.
Thank you, body, again for your patience. So in this bill, I will say it was not unanimous, but I feel like it's very clear, and the majority of the committee felt like the major test for if something is germane is about the subject matter. If it introduces a new subject, it is not germane. The subject of this bill, the chapter in our statutes that we find it in, all has to do with abortion, 100%. It's not about contraception. It's not about even health in general. It's a very specific topic that has to do with abortion. And the amendment brought up another facet of contraception, whatever you might want to call it, which is vasectomies. It broadens the scope tremendously, and for that reason, we will be ruling it non-germane.
I would like to challenge the Rules Chair's ruling.
The ruling of the Rules Chair has been challenged. I will remind the body that this is a debatable motion and is debatable by the following people: the maker of the amendment, which is Representative Oropeza, the member carrying the measure to amend, which is Representative Landwehr, the majority leader or his designee, Representative Hoheisel, and the minority leader or his designee, which is Representative Sawyer Clayton. And as a friendly reminder, this is a 2-minute debatable motion. Representative Oropeza, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is my first rules meeting, and I felt it to be very informational and very appreciative of all the opinions and back. However, I do stand with that this bill is broad enough, and I can give you various points in regards to reproduction and reproductive care. In regards that a patient would be asked if their pregnancy threatens the patient's physical health. How is that not broad enough to encompass a vasectomy? Maybe a man is having some type of a genetic issue or a heart issue, or they need to have a vasectomy done, and we need to know why. The pregnancy threatens the patient's mental or emotional health. Maybe the man feels like they're not at a point in their life where they should be having this, and they feel like there needs to be, in that area would encompass vasectomies. I feel like this is very broad enough and does encompass vasectomies, and I believe that they are needed to know, because especially since Roe v. Wade fell, that we need to know kind of where our men stand and where these patients stand who produce sperm and going forward. And I feel like this is something that we would need to know, and I would like to know going forward, and I thank you for your help.
Representative Landwehr.
I do ask that you support the ruling of the chair. Men can't have babies. Vasectomies don't belong in this. This is strictly about abortion reporting. It's not about limiting. It's not about changing the laws on abortion, whether women can get them or they can't get them. It's strictly about reporting. So I just assume we stay on the topic. So I would oppose the amendment.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here we go again. As much as I want to have a debate on calling people sperm-producing patients, our rules chair did rule this amendment non-germane. We have a procedure in place. You're able to challenge the germaneness of a ruling. Our rules chair heard everybody out back there. She made her ruling. It is not germane. I ask the body to stay with the rules chair and vote yes to sustain her ruling. Again, we have a process for this, and that's why we have a rules chair. We need to support our rules chair and vote yes to sustain her ruling. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sawyer Clayton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, body, here we go again. So what we are discussing here is, pull up your Masons, page 284, point number 3. So our Rules Committee Chairwoman, and this was not a unanimous decision, did determine that to be germane, the amendment is required only to relate to the same subject. her determination and the determination of other committee members is that this is a narrow subject that relates only to abortion. But if you look at your bill, page 2, lines 30 through 33, some of the questions that are asked are regarding, does the pregnancy threaten the patient's physical health? And does the pregnancy threaten the patient's mental or emotional health? This is not just in regards to abortion. This is in regards to legal health care in Kansas, because at current, abortion is legal in Kansas. If we look at this, abortion is legal reproductive health care, as is a vasectomy, and as are a number of other procedures. And if we want to be fair and treat all Kansas citizens the same, then if women are to be asked invasive questions upon obtaining legal health care, then other types of reproductive health care decisions should subject whoever is getting that procedure done to similar questions, if indeed this data collection is important. I would urge you to vote no, because again, as we stated, the subject is not abortion. The subject is legal reproductive health care, which both abortion and vasectomies are. Thank you.
As a reminder, a yes vote will sustain the ruling of the chair. A no vote will overturn the ruling. The question arises, shall the chairperson's ruling be sustained? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed say no. The noes appear to have it. A division, the ayes appear to have it. I apologize. But division has been requested. The clerk will open the roll and you may cast your vote. A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, it is in order. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. 78, anybody wish to change their vote? With 78 voting in favor and 37 opposed, the motion passes. The clerk will record the vote. Representative Oropeza, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Greatly appreciate this conversation. I would like to close with, I guess what's good for the goose is not always good for the gander.
For further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak today in favor of House Bill 2749. Thank you for the explanation by the representative carrying this bill, for her good explanation. But I would like to address the word intrusive that has been used to describe the bill a couple of times by opponents and in committee. If you've ever been to the doctor or the emergency room, you probably have had to answer multiple questions on a questionnaire asked by the nurse, forms that you have to navigate through. It's a little bit of a hassle. As a practicing physician, I've been required to ask different questions at different facilities at different times. And just off the cuff, I wrote down a few of these just as an example. I've been required to ask about drug use, tobacco, vaping use, sexual activity, male or female sexual partners, condom use, contraception. Do they feel safe at home? Is there an abusive family member or significant other? Are there guns in the home? Is there language or communication issue? Are there financial stresses? Are there educational limitations? These are some of the questions that I've been required to ask patients in the healthcare setting I've been required to ask these questions by third-party payers, Medicare recommendations, attorney opinions, corporate healthcare mandates. The reason I bring this up is that there is absolutely nothing in this bill that is different or intrusive compared to the status quo. These questions do serve a purpose. They provide data on the underlying factors that drive young women into these difficult situations. These data help us as legislators to address the difficulties and help us to focus resources on underlying factors rather than just assumptions. I urge you to vote yes on House Bill 2749. Thank you, Madam Chair.
For further discussion on the bill, Chair recognizes Representative Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you all have your lunch because we're going to get to know each other a little more than I'm comfortable with. The previous speaker's point about questions, I want to address that a little bit. But before we get into this a little bit, I became a father when I was 19 years old and I was making about $200 a week. I didn't have health insurance. I was not really prepared to be a father, and I was not married, and I wasn't exactly sure at all. Actually, I was not sure at all where my life was going to go. And we made the decision, my girlfriend at the time and I made the decision that worked for us and that aligned with our personal values. So I say that, we made that decision, and out of that, we had 2 children who are adults now, and my daughter has 2 children of her own, all of whom I adore. I say that because we get in these discussions and we sometimes lose track of the realities of people's lives and the decisions they have to make. And I also say that because I will not accept from anyone in this building a challenge or judgment to anything that's in my heart. And likewise, I'll resist doing that to you. But I'm really disappointed that the previous amendment didn't get on. And to the previous speaker's point about questions, after I had those kids, some years later, I decided that I wanted to have a vasectomy. I was asked no questions. No one asked me why I wanted it. No one asked me my sexual history. No one asked me if I was under duress. No one asked me about my financial position. No one asked me about whether this would affect my career or anything about my emotional or mental health. The only thing I was asked was, what if someday you decide that you wish you hadn't had this done and you want more children? And all I said is, that's not going to happen. And we went on our way and I got the procedure, and that's that. You could make the argument that these are 2 different things, that abortion and a vasectomy are 2 different things, and that a man, that we're completely in different planes here. But the underlying premise is not so different. When a man makes a decision to alter his body in a way that he can no longer fertilize an egg, he has forever eliminated his capacity to produce children. And I think there is value in collecting the data. The carrier of the bill said there's value in collecting this data. If we have a number of men who are voluntarily removing themselves from the reproductive process, and we value data, we should want to know that. But the bottom line is, I would argue that men are very germane to the topic of pregnancy. You actually can't do one without both. So I don't really usually like getting involved in these discussions. I tend to view this as people have their own personal views. I have mine, and I feel that I need to live that value for myself, and I feel that I don't have the right to tell other people how they should live or that they should live by my values. But I will say, if it's really disappointing, these conversations we have, because there's a lot of conversations we could be having that would actually reduce abortion in this state. We know that increased access to contraception, education, basic and better security, economic security for women, all reduce abortions. This is not theoretical, this is demonstrable. In other states, this happens, and we can do this. But we don't have those conversations. Instead, we work around the edges so that we can feign that we're doing something pro-life, when in fact, all we're doing is creating burdens for women and leaving men completely out of the equation. My hope is that someday we will stop pretending that women get pregnant all by themselves.
For further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the bringer of the bill please answer a question for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Is patient data attached to the information that we are asking to be provided?
No, it has never been, and it will not be under this bill.
Thank you. Body, we're hearing a lot of information today, and I know that some of us got to eat lunch and others are sitting there with your stomachs growling, so I'll keep this short and sweet. This is not intrusive. As another representative mentioned, we are asked all kinds of questions when we visit the doctor for all kinds of different reasons. This is just one more. I would actually prefer this go one step further, and when we ask a woman what her reason is for choosing abortion, I would ask that you remove someone who may be in the room with her from the room, because we may be dealing with an abusive partner or with a sex trafficker. This is important information. This is an opportunity for a woman to have that conversation with her medical professional. I ask you to support this bill. Thank you.
For further discussion, chair recognizes Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of House Bill 2749. The reason we disagree is because of our frame of reference, and certainly my frame of reference has always been that 2 lives are involved in abortion. And having trained medically, fortunately at a school where we had conscience objections appreciated and recognized, I never participated in abortions, but you're in that space and you're in the back of the clinic where you see a child in a bucket or in a dish, and you grieve for that child if you have my frame of reference, that potential life. I've raised 5 of those lives because their mothers chose life. I have a son who's a diesel mechanic, a daughter who's a legal assistant, a daughter still trying to find her way, a daughter who's a Head Start teacher, and a son who flies drones for Google. And I respect the choice that their mothers made. I'm kind of glad to hear my colleague from Hutchinson say he too would like to reduce abortions. And I think the only way we can do that is to inform public policy. I'll list for you right now the current KDHE form that is actually filled out when a pregnancy is being terminated. Obviously, things like age, marital status, and residence, but that residence would include your county, whether you live in a city, inside or outside city limits, your origin if you're Hispanic, further described, your ancestry, meaning your country of origin, your race, your education level, your last menstrual period, obviously a way to determine gestational age, previous pregnancies, previous terminations, previous live births, previous spontaneous abortions. And then there's a box to put in whether there's suspicion of abuse, either physical, mental, or emotionally abused. So we've been accused of asking intrusive questions to deter women, but I'll tell you that these things
largely already being asked. And we're developing data so we can inform public policy to prevent abuse, to enhance reproductive health, to reduce domestic violence, to improve adoption, and to improve supports for moms. I'm not just pro-birth here, I'm pro-life. And those are the things this body can support through better information. Thank you, Madam Chair.
For further discussion, Chair recognizes Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the carry of the bill stand for a few questions, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I noted in your opening and supporting this that you didn't bring up these questions are being added. The basis of your supporting of this is we don't get the report or the information enough. Why was that eluded from your original support of this?
I believe that I did talk about those questions because I also pointed out that during the hearing process, there were concerns brought up about many of those questions, and we removed 6 of those questions from the bill. So I believe I did talk about.
I do. Thank you for the clarification on that. And then what gap of research do these new questions fill? What is the justification of having to ask these questions specifically?
Let me grab my paper. Okay, the question on line 7 is having a baby would interfere with the woman's education. That's a reason for why they may have an abortion. Having a baby would interfere with the woman's employment or career. If you go through each of these, and I go back to the Guttmacher Institute website, and they have a section entitled Monthly Abortion Provision Study. Using the interactive map, they can find abortion numbers for Kansas from January through November of 23. We don't have those numbers from KDHE.
And these are the same questions being asked in their report?
I have not looked at this link here. It's a link that you can take and go to. But my point is even Guttmacher, who was started by Planned Parenthood, agrees that data is important. And they talked about on their own website of having the ability understanding women's reasons for having abortions can inform public debate and policy regarding abortion and unwanted pregnancy. Demographic changes over the last 2 decades highlight the need for reassessment of why women decide to have abortions. By doing that, it can also tell us as policymakers, what have we not made available to women? What else do they need? And again, if they decide to have an abortion, that is their decision. And we know it's legal.
Thank you very much. Folks, I know we've been here for a while. I just wanted to add, because these questions have been kind of bothering me. Why are these questions needed? And it just sounds that that more data is necessary. My question is then why does this need to be in law? Why can't this just state we partner with these individuals who provide that data and that service? And then the other thing that I just want to point out is I took the first question in this and I put it in Google Scholar, and for data from 2024, I got 1,410 results in the course of 0.09 seconds. Just stating that I understand that we need to get data more regularly. I understand that if it's an issue of reporting, we want to get it biannual, that's fine. But once we put this in law, these questions have to be asked. And I ask you just to consider, is this a necessary addition to this? Thank you very much.
For further discussion on the bill, Chair recognizes Representative Sawyer Clayton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Body, thank you for your patience. I think that this is an incredibly important debate. I had the opportunity to serve as a substitute on the Health Committee the day that this bill was heard. And there were some things about this bill that gave me cause for concern. One of the things that has been mentioned is that the questions allegedly would not reveal who had had the abortion. But if you look, again, looking at your bill on page 2, lines 28 through 29, the questions are: the pregnancy is the result of rape, the pregnancy is the result of incest. So oftentimes, especially if there are charges that are pressed in the instance of rape and incest, usually the victim is kept private, the perpetrator often is not. So if there's an instance, say, we've heard about some high-profile cases in other states where maybe a girl of 8, and yes, girls of 8 often do get their periods and become fertile at that tender age. It's a terrible thing. But a girl of 8 or 10 who might be seeking appropriate health care because oftentimes their hips haven't even spread enough to accommodate a growing child, might be seeking that health care as a result of being a victim of rape or incest. Those crimes are often publicly listed, and if they have to fill out this survey, it's fairly easy for someone to connect the dots. And this victim has the right to seek that proper health care and to go on with her life, seek therapy, and then hopefully go on to have a healthy, happy, consensual pregnancy later on in life. That is what we want to happen to those victims. But if that ends up becoming public, then that causes some major issues because those victims deserve privacy. And I do think that there is a privacy loophole in this bill, and that causes me major concern. We talk a lot about data collection as well. And so I spoke earlier about an earlier amendment that covered overall reproductive health care. I do think that we should continue to discuss important aspects of reproductive health care. A lot of us have noticed some of the major long-lasting effects from COVID-19. And I think, we're starting to see some other things coming out. One of those effects, I think, is something that might have a lasting effect on our birth rate, in particular in Kansas. And we hear about this even in Commerce Committee, where we talk about our low birth rate, how we don't have enough workers to get the job done, and how our birth rates in Kansas and in the nation are plummeting. And I'm here to talk about the unfortunate effects of erectile dysfunction. As we know, and as we have spoken before, it does take 2 to create a child. And you cannot produce a child, at least not in the traditional way, unless an erection is achieved, correct? I'd like to know anyone who's been able to manage that. But in any case, if we look at this, our birth rate is continuing to decline because of a decline in not only the health of women, but also the health of men. And so more men are starting to seek this very necessary health care in order to continue to not only strengthen their marriages, but to do as all good Kansans should do, which is apparently conceive and bear as many children as possible. If we want to make sure that we are protecting the sexual health of Kansans, all of them, we need to make sure that we are collecting valuable data, not just on those who terminate their pregnancies, and not just on those who, seek to get that sort of health care, but on those who, I have an amendment. I'll close real quick. Is that all right?
Point of order has been called. Representative Clifford.
Yes, Madam Chair, my point of order is that the current speaker should speak to the bill.
Well, I think that we've looked at what is a broad or a narrow definition. And so I will go ahead and submit my amendment. I imagine that germaneness will be immediately challenged, but let's go ahead and do this, and then I'll have more to say after this commences. There we are.
The amendment appears long.
Oh, what?
Ye- Representative Clayton, your amendment appears long. Do you care to wish your, do you care to wish? Do you wish to explain your amendment?
Oh, no, I'm happy to have the clerk read it.
Wonderful. The clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 9, after terminated by inserting an erectile dysfunction treatments that are prescribed, dispensed, or administered. In line 13, after terminated by inserting an erectile dysfunction treatment that has been prescribed, dispensed, or administered. In line 18, after terminated by inserting and erectile dysfunction cases treated. In line 19, after terminated by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment was prescribed, dispensed, or administered. In line 26, by striking or and inserting a comma. In line 27, after performed by inserting or who were prescribed, dispensed, or administered treatment for erectile dysfunction. On page 3 in line 2, after E, by inserting each male patient shall be asked prior to an erectile dysfunction treatment method that involves a drug or durable medical equipment being prescribed, dispensed, or administered, which of the following reasons was the most important factor in such male patient's decision to seek treatment for erectile dysfunction? 1, the male patient was to conceive a child with a patient's sexual partner.
Representatives will not be in the gallery during session.
2, the male patient wants to experience increased intimacy with such patient's sexual partner. 3, the male patient's wife or sexual partner wants the patient to seek treatment for erectile dysfunction. 4, the male patient wants to increase the pleasure of such patient's sexual partner. 5, erectile dysfunction is affecting the male patient's self-confidence. 6, erectile dysfunction is causing the male patient stress. Or 7, erectile dysfunction is causing the male patient shame or embarrassment. The male patient declines to answer, such responses shall be recorded. F, each report required by this section shall include, for the period of time covered by the report, 1, the number of times each of the reasons listed in subsection paren C was described as the most important, and 2, the number of times the male patient seeking treatment for erectile dysfunction was asked about the reasons listed in subsection paren E and declined to answer. Paren G, also on page 3 in line 4, after abortion by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment. In line 11, after abortion by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment. In line 13, after abortion by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment. In line 16, after abortion by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment. In line 23, after on by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment method was prescribed, dispensed, or administered to. In line 43, by striking paren F. On page 4 in line 4, by striking paren F and inserting paren H. In line 11, by striking paren F and inserting paren H. Also in line 11, by striking paren G and inserting paren I. And by redesignating subsections, paragraphs, subparagraphs, and clauses accordingly. On page 1 in the title, in line 1, after concerning by inserting sexual and reproductive health care relating to. Also in line 1, after abortion by inserting an erectile dysfunction treatment. Also in line 1, by striking relating to and inserting requiring certain. Also in line 1, after abortions by inserting erectile dysfunction treatments. In line 3, after performed by inserting or erectile dysfunction treatment prescribed, dispensed, or administered.
Representative Sawyer Clayton, would you like to proceed on your amendment?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, body, for all of your patience. Again, I do think that erectile dysfunction is a scourge on the state of Kansas. I think that it causes issues when it comes to our very important birth rate. And, gosh, getting data about this very valuable form of healthcare that appears to be increasingly necessary, although perhaps more on one side of the aisle than the other, is very important. Thank you.
For further discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this goes, back to an amendment that we saw earlier. This is not an amendment that belongs on this bill. This is about abortion reporting. Has nothing to do with the male body parts at this point. I ask that you vote no.
For further discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Hoheisel. Body, if you could please keep the noise down, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As much as I do want to debate erectile dysfunction, I do want to congratulate the Democrats on actually writing an amendment today that is probably germane to this. So I will not challenge the germaneness. I just urge the body to vote this amendment down. Thank you.
So further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Sawyer Clayton, you may close.
Well, Body, I think that given the amount of time that the Rules Committee has met, I think that we're all suffering a little bit of germaneness fatigue. And I think that we all know that we will disagree on this and it will split along party lines. So with permission of the body, I would like to withdraw this amendment unless you want to go do this again.
Is there objection to withdrawing the amendment? Seeing no objection, it is withdrawn. Still have the floor. Do you wish to continue on your discussion?
I do, Madam Chair, and thank you. I think that one of the overall issues with this type of debate is that the voters of Kansas have already made a decision that they consider this to be legal health care. I think that they have made a decision that they do not like intrusive and unpleasant questions being asked, especially when it comes to only one member of the population. There is a continued effort on the part of this body to create a subsection of sub-Kansans, that being people who are able to conceive and carry a child. I believe in a universal and fair treatment, and I do not like to see this type of legislation that tends to subject one group to the whims of another. There's a certain amount of smallness that comes from that, and I find it highly disappointing. I think that our body is better than this. I do urge you to vote no. In Kansas, we are fair. In Kansas, we are universal. Men are adults with rights, so are women. And if we are going to subject one group to humiliating questions when they get legal health care, then all groups should be subjected to humiliating questions when they get legal health care. Or we could vote against this bill, which, by the way, has not been enacted in any other state, and say that no one should be subjected to humiliating and intrusive questions when they are receiving legal health care. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Vic Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was getting nervous. I thought we were going to have a challenge to germaneness, and since my usual second speech was not available because she was carrying the amendment, I was going to have to ask for a volunteer from my caucus to speak to erectile dysfunction. I'm glad I didn't get to that point. I am always, as someone else said earlier, someone of my gender, I am reluctant to get up here and enter into the debate that I think should be confined to medical professionals and women. But when looking at this bill, long before today, I was puzzled by the purpose. I did receive an email today from a constituent, or someone claiming to be my constituent, who expressed, in their opinion, the purpose of the bill. And to that end, I would like to ask the carrier of the bill a couple questions, if she would please yield. My first question, he indicates that this information is vital to ensuring that women are receiving the assistance they need. And my question would simply be, of the carrier of the bill, do you agree that this information is vital to ensuring that women are receiving the assistance they need? Apparently, she refuses to answer such a basic question about the purpose of the bill, and that I don't understand, but she certainly has the right to refuse to carry the bill or to answer questions at the bill she chooses to carry. The second purpose that my constituent states is, without accurate and timely data, the public health programs suffer. And my question of the carrier of the bill would be, do you agree that that's a purpose of the bill, that without accurate and timely data, public health programs suffer? And again, I see that she refuses to answer such a basic question about the purpose of the bill. And that draws me to the inference that she's unable to answer either of those questions.
Further discussion on the vote? Oh, my apologies.
That's what's nice about being leaders. Just walk over there. So I would call the body's attention to the language of the bill on page 2, line 18, where one of the questions that patients, women, will be asked is whether or not their husband or partner wants such patient to have an abortion. And I go back to the correspondence I got from my constituent, and I ask, what the heck does the answer to that question have to do with public health? But more importantly, what that sentence, the question that sentence raises is, why is it so important that we find out that the patient's husband or partner wants such patient to have an abortion, yet we don't find it important enough to ask the patient themselves if the reason for the abortion is that she wants to have the abortion? You know, there are people who that's the only reason. Why is it so important we find out from the man if he wants the abortion, but we don't bother to ask the more important party the very same question? And with that, Madam Chair, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 2 in line 22 after 6, by inserting the patient wants to have an abortion, paren 7, and by redesignating subsections, paragraphs, subparagraphs, and clauses accordingly.
Representative Miller, you may proceed.
Thank you. I would stand for questions.
For questions on the amendment, Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to point out the questions, there's a list of things, and in the bill, it says, what is your main reason? What is your what is the most important factor in your decision to seek an abortion? And the reason the question is important is because your partner wants it. It's because coercion for women to have abortion is a real thing. It is something that should be addressed. It is something I feel like we have ignored. That's why I would ask you to vote against this amendment. It is just trying to make light of the fact that some women are coerced into having an abortion. And it is an important piece of information. So I'd ask you to vote no on this amendment.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Miller, you may close.
Well, I think the previous speaker must be confused about my amendment. My amendment does not ask to strike this other question of the husband or partner as to whether he wants the abortion. It simply adds the question And we go back, what's the most important factor? That's the question. And it is more than conceivable, I contend, that the woman who wishes to have the abortion, the most important reason to her is that she wants to. Why aren't we asking that question? Why aren't we interested in that piece of data? And as to the data, and by the way, a lot of people came up here and used the word intrusive. What I heard a couple times before that discussion started, the word was invasive. And yes, my physician, when I go in to care for my own health, my physician asks me a lot of personal, private questions. That person has never asked if the reason I was pregnant was because I was raped. Who in this room believes that's not an invasive question? Are you pregnant because of incest? I've never been asked that question, and I can't imagine what it must feel like if someone was asked that question, to which I find totally unnecessary to satisfy questions of public health. If we care so much about the women that are looking to have an abortion, that we ask them to address all these questions, why are we not just asking them if it's simply something they want, as we're doing about their partner or their husband? With that, I move my amendment.
You have heard the motion by Representative Vic Miller to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say no. The noes appear to have it.
Division, and I request a roll call vote.
Division has been called for. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, a roll call is in order. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll and take the tally. Does any member wish to change their vote? Seeing none, with 36 yay and 80 nay. Oh, Representative Hoy votes aye. Further changes of votes? Seeing none, with 37 voting yay and 80 nay, motion fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Miller, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I need to point out that there is a woman in the world who I never met that blessed me with a son. So when it comes to issues of personal choice, they are deeply personal, and I respect the people that have to make that choice regardless of their choice, because I respect that it is their choice. I don't know about the rest of you, but we were having this vigorous debate around August 2. I talked to any number of people, acquaintances, friends, relatives, who would consider themselves pro-life, but were prepared to vote no on the amendment and did so from the foundation that they did not think such a decision was something the government should be sticking their nose into. And I expect that if I were to have a conversation with those people about this bill, they would say the same thing. It's nobody's business but the person making the choice and their treating physician. And I certainly subscribe to that. My final point would be that we took that vote, and the reason we took that vote is because the Supreme Court of Kansas, just 2 or 3 years before the vote, had ruled that women in this state have a constitutional right to bodily autonomy. And more succinctly, this is what the court said in Hodes. The state may only infringe upon the right to decide whether to continue a pregnancy if the state has a compelling interest and has narrowly tailored its actions to that interest. I love being a predictor, and my prediction is this legislation someday, if it passes this House and passes through the veto process and becomes law, that our court will apply Hodes and say, this is unconstitutional under the Kansas Constitution because there is not only no compelling interest, there's no reason for this bill. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Landwehr, you may close.
Well, it's been an interesting debate and discussion. I just want to respond to a few of the things that have been said up here today that may not have been 100% accurate. Women can refuse, just like they can refuse today, to answer the questions to the report. This bill is not intended to harass or intimidate any abortion providers. I find it interesting. We also heard that we don't need additional data, but yet Guttmacher and a few others seem to think that we do. This bill has nothing to do with eliminating abortion in Kansas. Doesn't ban it, doesn't touch on that whatsoever. We heard that Kansans don't have enough access to contraceptions. I would beg to differ with that because we know that they do. The health departments, the FQHCs, the schools. We're hearing a bill right now that talks about a child that was given contraceptions without parental consent at a school by an FQHC. And you're right, Kansas spoke when Value Them Both was voted down. And I've respected that vote. Just look at what bills are parked in my committee. We did listen to conversations in debate in committee, and we removed 6 lines of questions. Do you think that the people that helped draft this bill with me were happy? No, but they tried to be reasonable. Information for a woman is important so that she can make an informed decision. And I'm going to reiterate one more time. No private information is given to KDHD. No private information will be given to KDHE today if this bill becomes law. We heard that, you know what, doctors don't ask questions. Doctors don't this, doctors don't that. But it's not unusual for a doctor to ask a male who has come in with a woman to the appointment to leave the room. They might feel that or suspect that she's been abused, raped, or neglected, or that she's being forced to do something she doesn't want to do. That happens all the time, and I'm glad that it does. That's protecting women. Let me see where I found this. Oh, this is right. We talk about privacy, but apparently Planned Parenthood of Great Plains isn't concerned about privacy. Its HIPAA policy under fundraising activities reads, "We may use health information about you to contact you in an effort to raise money for our not-for-profit operations." That's a violation of privacy. I don't expect to go into a healthcare facility and be told that my information is going to be used for fundraising sources. I could sit here and go through a lot of data that I have pulled on this. This bill was not put together lightly. This bill was not brought to this floor lightly. We've tried to do the research. We've tried to answer the needs. It saddens me that the proponents of abortion want to hear nothing, absolutely nothing, no matter how minute it will be. I don't operate that way as a legislator. I may not agree with you, and sometimes I don't agree with my friends in here. But I will listen. I will take their words under advisement and decide whether I can agree or disagree, or we can find a compromise. I did not find that in the hearing for this bill or a couple other bills that we had. Planned Parenthood stood before us and they said, well, yeah, we provide information for adoption. Well, who would those providers be? Well, we don't know. But yet we had other conferees that were willing to share those providers. Once again, this bill does not ban abortion. It does not limit abortion. It provides women information to make an informed decision, to make sure that this woman is not being forced or made to have this abortion, which I think is important. Personally, I don't view abortion as a health care, except for the 3 exceptions that we used to have. Had I known when I had my abortion that I could have gone ahead and carried that baby and given that baby a gift by allowing another set of parents that were ready and willing and had the ability to take care of that child, I would not have had that abortion. That discussion didn't happen back then. We hear it happens today, but we don't know because there's a veil of secrecy that operates within these clinics. We just want to have more information, make sure that we're making the right decisions for these women. You also heard today that we need to do more in Medicaid to see that women get more care, pregnant women get more care. Pregnant women are eligible for Medicaid today, and guess what? We changed the law, I think it was 2 years ago, I lose track of time. 90 days is the care that we provided a woman after having her baby. Well, if you've ever dealt with postpartum, it's bad. We extended that. And it was led by people like myself who are pro-life to extend that to 12 months. And it's provided a lot of success and access for women. I would ask that when the body rises and report, that it reports House Bill 2749 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Landwehr to report House Bill 2749 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. This concludes our general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Madam Chair, I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Clerk will read the report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends that House Bills 2676 and 2749 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Blue to adopt the committee of the whole report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The report is adopted. Reports of standing committee. The clerk will read.
The Committee on K-12 Education Budget recommends House Bill 2485 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Committee on Appropriations recommends House Bill 2551 be passed. The Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications recommends House Bill 2806 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Health and Human Services recommends Senate Bill 433 be passed.
The following committee appointments are requested effective immediately. Representative Melissa Oropeza replaces Representative Dennis Heiberger on the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, March 6th. Representative Dennis Heiberger replaces Representative Henry Helgerson on the House Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice on Thursday, March 7th. Representative Dennis Heiberger replaces Representative Valdina Nguyen on the House Federal and State Affairs Committee on Thursday, March 7th. Representative Webster Roth will replace Representative Dave Beeler on the House Committee on Health and Human Services on March 6th. This appointment will expire at the end of the day on March 6th. Representative Susan Estes will replace Representative Mark Schreiber on the House Committee on Judiciary on March 6th. This appointment will expire at the end of the day on March 6th. Senate Bill 473 is withdrawn from Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice and referred to Committee on Judiciary. Are there announcements? Speaker recognizes Representative Landwehr.
Health and Human Services will be still meeting today in 10 minutes, so it'd be 2:15.
Speaker recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Corrections, we are still meeting. We've got about 15 conferees waiting on us, so as soon as we can get down there, we'll get started. Thank you.
Speaker recognizes Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Higher Education Budget Committee will not meet today. What we were going to work on today will be rescheduled for tomorrow, Thursday, March the 7th at 1:30 p.m. in 281 North. We will be working House Bill 2705 and House Bill 2460. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker recognizes Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to invite everybody to our prayer breakfast tomorrow morning in room 142. We'll have Steve Slavic. He's going to share some of his information and some of his insights of traveling around the world. That'll be at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Speaker recognizes Representative Concanon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Child Welfare and Foster Care Committee will meet at 2:15.
Speaker recognizes Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Speaker. House Ag and Natural Resources will meet upon adjournment. Thank you.
Speaker recognizes Representative Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Early Learning Advocacy Day at the State House, bringing nearly 150 child care and early childhood development professionals and advocates. On the first floor In the rotunda, you have the opportunity to read books to the children and learn more about the wonderful work that happens around our state. The work supports parents and helps children thrive. Today, I'd like to recognize the talented work of Kansas Head Start Association, Kansas Parents as Teachers, and the child care providers across the state as they are participating in their advocacy event. Some have been able to join us in the gallery today if they're still here. Thank you if you're still here. Please join me in recognizing their valuable work and showing appreciation to the professionals dedicated to the early learning and childhood development.
Anybody up there? Speaker recognizes Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Education Committee, we will be meeting immediately upon adjournment in our normal room with a presentation from Randy Watson, and we'll be working Senate Bill 360. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker recognizes Representative Stogsdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will be having agenda tomorrow morning, 8:30, 152 South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker recognizes Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to welcome Latinas from about 75 Latinos that probably, I think they're scattered now, but we have about 75 Latinas from almost a lot of congressional districts in Kansas, as well as high school and college students who have traveled to the Capitol for Latina Leaders Day. They're here to learn about the legislative process, tour the Capitol, and get to know who represents them. So if you see them, say hello. Like I said, they were in the balcony, but they've scattered now. I was going to read a resolution, but a Latino resolution, but I'll be doing that tomorrow, as there wasn't time today. But thank you. So if you see them around, say hello, because I know they're scattered around here somewhere. Thank you.
Speaker recognizes Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attention commerce fans. Cancel Christmas. We're canceling our meeting today. We're postponing it actually until tomorrow at 1:30. We'll see you then.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we're going to calendar tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the old Supreme Court room. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, March 7th at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.